Tell me, have you ever found yourself feeling so low and lonely to the point where you don't feel as though life is worth living, or you don't have any energy to carry on? You could actually be suffering from depression. Today, our very special guest is a very big welcome, and thank you for being brave enough to come out here and talk about your situation. You're actually one in a million. Please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, I'm in my late 30s. I'm a single mom and have just recently taken myself back to school. So that's what keeps me busy most of the time. When I'm not a full-time student, I'm a full-time mom.
You hear people saying, I'm feeling so depressed or I'm feeling so low. But do they really know what it means? Because it's actually depression we're talking about. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about how it actually feels when you're experiencing depression.
For me, my experience was, I was fatigued. I was very fatigued. I was always tired, and because of that, I wanted to sleep all the time. I didn't want to get involved, go out. I really did not want to do all those things. And also I ended up overeating and gaining weight, and that now caused even more self-esteem issues because of being overweight. Even more reason to stay at home and hide myself from everybody else. Also, another thing that I experienced was pain in my body, in my joints, constant headaches. Yeah, so those were some of the physical things that I was going through.
How young were you when you were having all this?
The very first time I had a breakdown, I'd call it, as people call it, well, professionals call it, I was about 13, 14 years old.
That's very young, isn't it, really?
Yes, it is. The second time was when I was about 23 years old, and only because I had not dealt with the things that I had that had first caused the first breakdown that I had when I was about 13, 14 years old.
You know, depression can be triggered by a lot of things, some of which are, for example, stressful situations or extremely traumatic situations. These things can also happen in your childhood, like child abuse, molestation. I'm just wondering, for you, what do you think triggered the start of your experiencing depression?
My very first experience with depression was caused by sexual molestation, abuse. By
How old were you?
I was about 30. Well, it started when I was about 10 years old.
Yeah.
Went on until I was about 13 years old.
Wow.
It was hard because nobody seemed to know what was going on in my family. And I was not, because of the shame that was associated with it. This was an uncle that everybody knew. And so it was very hard to talk about it, even just to bring it up.
Yeah.
It was not something that we ever discussed in our home.
Nobody knew about what was going on at all.
Nobody had any idea that was going on at home. And it happened a lot of times when the rest of the family was in a different room.
Wow.
So it happened while the family was at home.
I can't imagine what it must have been like, huh? It must have been really, really hard. How did you deal with these feelings of you can't tell anybody, this is somebody you trust and love? How did you deal with it?
For me, it came out as anger, a lot of anger. I just became really, really angry and had a lot of anger outbursts and just being rude. I think that was the only way that I could cope at the time, because I didn't know, and rebelling against everything and anything. It made me feel more powerful, I guess, because when I was angry, then nobody would come near me, nobody would ask a question. No, I mean, people just stayed away from me, and that is what I wanted more than anything else.
How did your abuser actually deal with this anger that you had? Was it also directed towards him as well?
Not really, because by the time the anger was coming out, you see, before, when I was going through the whole abuse, I was very timid. I was not angry. But once I confronted him and asked him to stop, that was when I was about 13 years old. I just confronted him and told him, you know what, you can't keep doing this to me. You have to stop. And he stopped. And that's when the anger started, because I felt stupid. I felt foolish. I thought to myself, I should have stopped this a long time ago. If it was that easy, I should have stopped it a long time ago. And I started to blame myself for letting it go on for that long.
Yeah. I can imagine what that must have been like, with you just being 13 years old, with the helplessness and the powerlessness. which is understandable why it took you so long to get to that stage of actually confronting him. Because he's also an adult, isn't
Yes,
he?
he was.
An uncle.
Yes.
I think a lot of people who are going through stuff like that find it very difficult to get to that point. And this is where you can also help us. When did you realize that this was a real problem, that your illness was connected to all the abuse that you were having at the time with your uncle?
I must have been in my 20s already.
That's when you connected.
That's when I connected it all.
So that took quite long, isn't it?
Yes, it did.
And in between 13 and into your 20s, how were you existing? How were you feeling, behaving? Was the illness still around for you?
It was maybe a little more manageable because I was in high school. So there were lots of things. I got involved in everything I could find. I was in music, I was in drama. I stayed away from school. I looked for every opportunity to just be out there and, running around and having fun. We call it fun. So throughout high school, it was easy to manage. It was after high school that now when everything is quieted down, that I found it very, very hard, very difficult to just deal.
Yeah.
And that's when also, again, even throughout high school, I had a natural repellent, or I completely repelled, like the male teachers.
Yeah.
Constantly found reason to confront them.
Yeah.
And basically, have a fight with them.
Yeah.
If possible.
So every time you confronted the male teachers,
Especially the male teachers.
it was your uncle you were getting at.
Exactly.
Through so much. I'm just wondering, at what stage did you realize that this was a very real mental problem? What did you do? How did you find the help that you may have needed?
I realized it was a problem. Now the second breakdown, and this time it was a total breakdown. I was in an abusive relationship at the time that was supposed to lead to marriage, and that particular one, it broke. When it broke, because of all the things that had been said to me by this person that I was with, left me feeling not just vulnerable but totally worthless.
Yeah.
And again, I think because I hadn't dealt with the past issues, the whole abuse and everything, it all came back now double, and
In a big way.
I didn't even know what to do with myself, because now all that self-worth that I had been trying to build up on my own, because I'd never gone to a professional.
Yeah.
I'd been trying to do this. I had started talking about it, not much. And also, church helped at that time, but helped to not to really deal with the problem, but to deal with the symptoms that were coming out, that being the anger.
So at what stage did you realize that this was a very, very real problem that needed to be dealt with at a higher level?
When I hit rock bottom.
To describe to the listeners, what do you mean, rock bottom? What was it?
I had a really bad relationship that was supposed to be leading to marriage, but broke up, which is a good thing. But because of the things that my then fiancé had been saying to me, and had said to me about quite a lot of things that he had said, and mix all that with the past, I completely lost faith in myself. Totally lost faith in myself. And with that came a feeling of hopelessness, because I felt very hopeless in this situation. I didn't see any other way out. Helplessness, because here it is again, somebody has spoken all these words over me, and I have taken them to heart, and I don't know how to change me.
So you were actually experiencing abuse?
Yes.
Emotional abuse?
Yes.
Was there ever any physical abuse at all?
No, there was none.
From what you said earlier, when we were having this conversation, you said that you reached a place where you didn't want to live.
I didn't see the sense. Why wake up to another bad day? But what was even worse is that I was not even able to sleep, let alone wake up.
Yeah.
Every time I closed my eyes, I didn't even have to be in deep sleep.
Yeah.
I would have all these nightmares, and I don't know whether I guess they call them also hallucinations, because as the minute I closed my eyes, I had this feeling of falling.
Wow.
Total helplessness of falling and trying to grasp and not being able to grasp at anything. And then there was a buzz in my head. I never understood it. Just this buzz constantly.
And only you could hear
and
that
I could hear it.
Yeah.
And I'll be looking around, I'm thinking, how come nobody else is hearing this?
Yeah.
And there was pain again. Pain, headaches, joint aches, all sorts of pains in my body.
And even just being engaged in this conversation, it's difficult to imagine that you were once there. Somehow you've managed to get yourself to this place. Or how did you start to get yourself here?
First, it was realizing that I had a problem. And then I began to talk about it.
But how did you realize you had a problem?
I used to love reading. That was one of the things that I did a lot. I was reading a lot. I was watching a lot of TV because I did not want to go out.
Yeah.
So one of those times when I was watching, I think it was a talk show host. I'm not sure whether it was Oprah or one of those. Long time ago. And they were talking about depression or just feeling bad. They didn't quite call it depression at that time. And then later on, I found a magazine that was now talking about depression and what it's all about. And as I was reading, I'm thinking, I have all these symptoms. This is how I feel. And it had like a 4-step on how to come out of that depression.
Yeah.
And I followed it slowly. It was, I can't quite remember exactly what they were, but the first one was talk about it.
Yeah.
Find somebody you trust and talk about it.
Yeah.
Then start to look at yourself. Start writing a journal, and then write a list of all the good qualities that you have. Don't try and exaggerate it. Just be as real as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those are the 3 that I remember, but they were very helpful. They helped me get to a place where now I could start to deal and look at this problem and start to, just to deal with it.
So what would you advise anybody who might be feeling this way, or who knows of anybody who might be going through depression? What would you actually advise those who are in it right now?
Talk about it. Find somebody that you trust and just start to open your heart.
It's very interesting because depression is actually a talk therapy, and depression has a way of isolating the person who is experiencing that illness. So I really agree with you. We need to talk about these things, really. And you're never alone, because once you start talking, you experience the other people going through the same thing.
Exactly.
But what would you tell about family and friends who know of somebody who are experiencing this? Because a lot of times people find it very difficult to take you seriously. They say, get out of it, pull yourself together.
Yeah.
What would you tell them?
Listen.
Just listen to this person.
Listen to this person.
Because they're really in pain.
Exactly.
Yeah?
Exactly.
So listeners out there, can you just listen when anybody who comes to you and they are feeling depressed? Just listen, isn't it?
That's it.
Yeah?
That's it.
And for those of you out there who are actually experiencing this, talk about it. Do not think that you are alone, because there are a lot of people out there. Listen, it's been really nice talking with you, and thank you again so much for coming. I'll just let the listeners know that, it was very difficult finding somebody to come and sit here and talk about themselves, really, about this illness. So thank you very much.
It was my pleasure.
If you need any help, please contact us on our website or Facebook. Come share with others, anonymously or not, or just to support. I'd also like to thank my God for having brought me to this place, because I have been through depression myself. I feel that it is because of my God that I'm actually here.